instead. Darn it, it's all set. I'll just go off this. I call to order this special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified School District Number 48 Governing Board. The time is 5:01 p.m. At this time, I would like to ask for Vice President Werner to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And starting with a roll call vote from my far right, please.
Amy Carney.
Libby Hartwells. Karen Werner.
And I'm Julie Sinowski. 4 of our 5 governing board members are present. We do have a quorum. At this time, I'd like to ask to see if any of our governing board members have any changes they'd like to make to our agenda that's posted right now. None? Seeing that there are none, I would like to make a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 4-0. And at this time, it is 5:02 p.m. The governing board may recess into executive session pursuant to ARS Section 38-431.03A3 for the purpose of obtaining legal advice from the attorney for the public body regarding the constitution of committees pursuant to Governing Board Policy CE and Governing Board Policy IGA. Is there a motion to move into executive session?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Dr. Hartwells, seconded by Werner. All in favor, say aye.
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 That motion passes 4-0. We will move into executive session, and we are going to go to 105. Motion to adjourn our executive session. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Werner. All in favor to adjourn the executive session, say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 5-0. And we will reconvene our special meeting. The time is 6 p.m. and it is Tuesday, February 7th, 2023. We will start this portion of the meeting with our superintendent's comments. Dr. Menzel.
Well, good evening, President Sanowski, Vice President Werner, and members of the governing board. This past Saturday, SUSD was well represented in the 69th annual Parada del Sol. Based on the information that I have in front of me, we had at least 12 floats in the parade and 10 marching bands. The SUSD groups were enthusiastically represented, and the word on the street is that it was the largest crowd ever. I'm not sure that's true, but it might be. And I hear that everybody had a great time, and I'm truly grateful for all the staff, students, and families who participated in this signature event for our city. The second item on my update this evening is on Monday, we hosted a standard response protocol standard reunification method training at Coronado High School with attendees from across the valley. This was at the request of the Public Consulting Group, which is the organization we're working with on our digitized threat assessment protocol. They were hosting the event in the valley, and I think, as best I can tell, their initial location wasn't going to be able to accommodate them, so they contacted us. And thanks to the work of Josh Friedman and our partners at Coronado High School, especially Principal Palatucci, they worked to make the auditorium available. And so we're truly grateful to be able to provide that opportunity for training in the area of school security and standard reunification methods. February is designated as both Career and Technical Education Month and Black History Month. And throughout the month, we'll be highlighting areas and programs, opportunities for career and technical education. You may recall this is called out specifically in our strategic plan as an area of importance for us. And Black History Month. Although we believe Black history is American history and is embedded throughout our curriculum and throughout the year, this is a time where we can actually focus our attention on celebrating the contributions of Black Americans throughout our history. Also, we will shortly be launching our Wellness Committee, and I've been asked to give a plug for anyone who's interested in serving on the Wellness Committee to take a look at our committee hub. I think by tomorrow that will be up, so anyone who wants to be a part of that should submit an application online, and within the next month or so, we should be able to reconvene that group. So we encourage anyone who has an interest to submit an application. I also want to point out a bit of good news. You've heard me talk about the aggregate expenditure limit. And while I wish that today I was saying that it was overridden by both the House and Senate, I can only say that half of the battle has been won. Today, the House voted 46-14 to override the aggregate expenditure limit, which is very good news. And as I understand it, yesterday and today, the only reason the Senate didn't vote is that they were one member short and they want to have full participation. So they're still hoping to get to it this week. It never hurts to contact your senator and encourage them to take action quickly so that we can put this behind us and focus on completing the year as strong as we can and then build the budget for next year. Finally, I want to thank everyone who came out this evening and those who have emailed the governing board over the past week. We continue to focus our attention on providing world-class, future-focused learning for each one of our 21,600 students. We are living into our values of excellence, empathy, trust, inclusion, integrity, and unity. We value each and every one of our students and staff, and we will not be distracted by those who would seek to tear apart our school community. We are Scottsdale unified, and together we will continue to accelerate opportunities for all of our students.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel. And we are going to begin part 7 of our agenda, which is information and discussion items. First up is our SAA, SEA, and SSPA updates. Some very important work is done by these organizations, our employees in our district, and I've said before, we don't exist without, for the best interest of our students without our employees. So Ms. Strombers, Leeper, Williams, and Bleeker are here tonight.
Guess who drew this short straw again? Good evening, President Sanowski, Vice President Werner, members of the Governing Board, and Dr. Menzel. My name is Carrie Blaker, currently serving as the elected president of the Scottsdale Support Professionals Association. The SSPA is the representative body for the Scottsdale Unified School District's education support professionals, otherwise known as classified staff. First and foremost, we thank the governing board, our superintendent for reestablishing the importance of a professional relationship between our association as the sole bargaining unit for the classified and the governing board and all district employees. When you think of our classified ESPs, this one's a big one, so please bear with me. When you think of our classified ESPs, we hope that you see and value what is happening on the front line. Our ESPs are keeping the SUSD vision, engaging all students in a world-class, future-focused learning, even out of the classroom by work being done by over 1,300 workers as nutritional services, school aides, transportation, community education, athletics, grounds, facility workers, health assistants, registrars, administrative assistants, library specialists, para-educators, material handlers, IT support, community specialists, security, trade skilled workers, human resources, benefits, payroll, instructional support specialists, transition specialists, CMAR, auditorium technicians, communications, print shop, finance, risk management, federal and state grants, translation services, and purchasing. I hope that I've captured all of our ESPs and that I did not leave anyone out. Welcome new governing board members. In the spirit of movie titles, this is not Mission Impossible. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to continue to inspire, motivate, and empower all to think critically, act collaboratively, and embrace diversity for a life of intellectual exploration, community engagement, and personal growth. We want to take this time to share how much we appreciate being part of the bigger discussions that have been happening under Dr. Menzel's leadership. Through this collaboration, we are once again restoring the trust that was once lost. Your classified staff have a voice now and has been brought to many tables where decisions are made that directly impact the sites or the employee groups. Our associations have been added to extended cabinet meetings where we now have a voice to share what happens at the front line when new policies or procedures are implemented. We sit on professional development committees, strategic action plan committees, interview committees, reclassification, IBN, meet and confer, technology committees, benefit committees, calendar committees, and more coming. We appreciate the time carved out of these meetings to allow us the opportunity to give you, the governing board, our updates. As well, as we all are in our IBN teams, it is our interest to continue to make SUSD the destination district when it comes to salary, benefits, and working conditions. SSPA continues to deal with the compression issues when it comes to salaries for our classified staff, as we will be making our recommendation proposals very soon. As this was the first year our SUSD ESPs are making above minimum wage. A special thanks to last year's IBN team for making that happen. Keeping with the core values of this district, excellence, integrity, empathy, trust, inclusion, and unity, SSPA would like for this governing board to continue to build relationships by getting to know your classified staff and highlight the work we all do. Thank you all for your service to public education and believing that we are still better together.
Thank you, Ms. Blaker, and please thank the over 1,300 employees from those of our family members, right? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Menzel, President Sanowski, members of the Governing Board, and Ms. Wagner. I'm Becky Williams, currently serving as the elected president of the Scottsdale Education Association. We are the representative body for certified staff in SUSD, which includes, and I probably will forget a few, classroom teachers, guidance counselors, special education-related service providers, nurses, social workers, psychologists, librarians, teachers on assignment, academic coaches, and sports coaches, and anyone else I left off, I apologize. As we continue the meet and confer process, we are looking forward to finalizing a compensation package later this week and bringing forth a recommendation to this board. We believe our proposal makes a substantial commitment to competitive and sustainable salary increases that value the work, talents, and experience of our certified staff while maintaining fiscal responsibility. Our certified team values the collaborative work we are able to engage in with the district leadership team to bring our shared interests to fruition, including completing a certified employment agreement. We know that compensation is a very important piece of the attract and retain formula, but it isn't the only thing that matters to educators. As a bargaining team, it is our responsibility to listen to our certified colleagues and advocate for the supports and resources needed to ensure excellent learning environments for our students. In the current hiring climate, amidst a national teacher retention crisis, we can't afford to get this wrong. I want to share with you what we hear loudly and clearly as we listen to our colleagues. As professionals, we expect this board to uphold stated policy, to create and sustain a progressive professional climate and operational procedures that call for and use the full creative capacities of all employees in the attainment of educational goals. Every day on the job, we strive as educators to create spaces where all of our students are included, accepted, cared for, and respected, and can learn. We expect our elected leaders to provide the resources needed to make this happen and to focus on solutions to the real issues that create obstacles to teaching and learning. Instead, we are confronted with accusations. The moment a lesson hints at diversity or a student's emotional needs are considered, we are bombarded with manufactured outrage that teachers are indoctrinating students with a racially divisive agenda or grooming them into a gender identity crisis. I assure you these things are not happening in our buildings, nor is there a secret plan to do so. We simply want to teach our students. But focusing on these non-issues and fueling the relentless attacks will be the last straw that finally makes the burden of this difficult job too much for many to bear. And good, valued, and experienced educators will continue to walk away from SUSD and from this profession to the detriment of our students. As professionals who believe that all children should have the freedom to an education that prepares them for the future, we, the SEA, voice our support for our superintendent. From the onset of his tenure in Scottsdale, Dr. Menzel has kept his focus on student learning, educator support, and parent community involvement. He has brought more stability to the district in the last 3 years than most educators, students, and families have experienced in Scottsdale in the last decade in SUSD. He has been transparent in laying out his vision for a district that leads through its values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Educators in Scottsdale applaud Dr. Menzel's leadership and share a common goal to make this a place where students of every race, culture, identity, background, and zip code have the freedom to learn and pursue their goals and dreams. On behalf of our certified staff in SUSD, I make this request of you. As governing board members, you have the responsibility to uphold your sworn duty to act in the best interest of the district. It is not in the best interest of any district stakeholders, especially our students, to allow the disruption caused by all of these baseless accusations to continue. As our elected leaders, you must take a stand against these attacks, and you must support our district personnel so that our focus remains on teaching and learning. We are all better together, and SUSD simply cannot lose more talented and qualified professionals. Our students deserve more.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williams. Ms. Leeper, go ahead.
Good evening, President Sanowski, Vice President Warner, members of the Governing Board, Dr. Menzel, and Gladys. I'm Veronica Leeper, currently serving as the elected co-president with Grace Dombrace of Scottsdale Administrators Association. The SAA is a representative body for principals and assistant principals in SUSD. The Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board recognizes and sets policy to our employees' associations by adopting governing board policies that establish a professional relationship between the governing board and district employees.
Governing board policy calls for common understanding, mutual respect, and confidence between employees and the governing board to create and sustain a progressive professional climate and operational procedures that call for and use the full creative capacities of all employees in the attainment of educational goals. We work together to prioritize improvement for our schools so that students are supported with highly qualified, passionate, and talented professionals. Governing board policy provides a collaborative process between the governing board and employees to address salary, benefits, leadership opportunities, working conditions, and employment agreements. Through Superintendent Dr. Menzel's leadership and in alignment with his vision, SUSD uses the process of interest-based negotiations, which is a problem-solving approach using informed collaboration to understand needs and interests between the district and employees. Last year, SAA's represented employees realized corrections to our salary schedules for principals and assistant principals, the reinstatement of stipends for high school athletic directors who are required to accommodate athletic calendars with extended workdays and added days, and to reinstate and edit an employee agreement. This year, SAA has presented interests that are aligned to our district's strategic plan and create opportunities to attract and retain highly qualified, passionate, and talented professionals because our students deserve the best. Interest-based negotiations eliminates the conflict of taking positions, but rather considers the priorities of our district and within our strategic plan to work together in improving our schools and the educational experiences for all of our students. Respectfully asking, what are your interests? Because there is no room for the interference of politics or for the condemnations that have dominated the narrative about our school leaders, our teachers, our parents, and our community. Our students in SUSD deserve your commitment to them and to their education and their schools.
To each member of the governing board, your service on this board must be with the same interests of our district and the strategic plan for the benefit of the students attending Scottsdale Unified School District schools. Please defend the right of each of our students to a world-class, future-focused education.
Thank you, leaders. At this time, governing board members, do you have any questions or comments for these leaders? I would just like to thank you all for your work and to all of your, the voices that you represent. I know you're here for the best interest of our students, so thank you again for your work.
Thank you.
And we will move on.
Board President
Oh,
Snowski. Yeah,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I just wanted to thank all of you and all of you for being here tonight in support of our school district, everything you do, despite strong headwinds and in large part synthetic headwinds. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hartwells. And at this time, we will move on to information discussion item 7B, advancement via individual determination, AVID update. Dr. Menzel.
Well, thank you, President Sanowski. Tonight, I'd like to ask Margaret Cerna to come and introduce our presenters this evening. As many of you know, we've had AVID in the district for some time, and we have a proposal in front of you for initial review and discussion. Margaret.
Good evening, everybody. President Sanowski, board members, Dr. Menzel, and Mrs. Wagner. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. Presently, Scottsdale Unified School District has 4 designated advancement via individual determination AVID schools. We have Tonalea Middle School, Copper Ridge K-8 School, Hohokam Elementary School, and Yavapai Elementary School. Tonight, we are bringing forward information in support of the possibility of bringing additional AVID programs to other interested schools. At this time, I would like to introduce the fabulous AVID coordinator, Brianna Johnson, and the incredible Arcadia principal, Dr. Janelle Dansky, that are here to give you more information on bringing AVID to our district. Thank you, everybody. Ladies?
Good evening, Madam President, the trusted board, and Dr. Menzel. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to present to you all. We are seeking to expand the reach of AVID in our district from 4 schools to 8. in the upcoming 2023-2024 school year. The schools we are desiring to bring on are Arcadia High School, Echo Canyon, Tavan Elementary School, and Pueblo Elementary School as well. Presenting with me this evening is Dr. Dansky, principal of Arcadia High School. She is experienced with AVID and is a wealth of knowledge. So at this time, I would like us to turn our attention to her as she explains the school-wide implementation of AVID and the elective as well.
Good evening. Thank you for having us tonight. So AVID is a program that's supported by over 30 years of research and encompasses two parts, AVID school-wide and the AVID elective at the secondary level. Used as a school reform model, AVID school-wide is a framework that utilizes best teaching practices that benefits all students and is shown to increase student achievement and preparedness for college and post-secondary training. Research shows that AVID increases school performance. This includes state testing scores, graduation rates, attendance, students' GPAs, and an increase in the number of students taking advanced placement and dual enrollment courses, and also the number of students attending college after graduation. So the second part of this is the AVID elective, and this is for students in grades 6 through 12. It's targeted towards first-generation college students, and they take the AVID elective each year in a cohorted model with the same teacher who serves both as an instructor and an advisor. Students selected are in the academic middle, and the structure of the elective supports them to take on more rigorous coursework. Additionally, students receive the support in exploring and applying for college and scholarships, and the research shows that the longer a student is involved in AVID, the more prepared they are for rigorous coursework and for college. I also want to say that the AVID program ties directly to our strategic plan, namely goal number 1, academic achievement. By utilizing the AVID framework, we can focus on rigorous academic learning while supporting students with best practices in education that allow them to achieve at high levels to thrive in high school and beyond. We will also address strategic goal number 2, culture and climate, later in this presentation.
On the screens here, you will see this is the AVID framework, the college and career readiness framework that AVID uses. So what you will see is that the work that AVID does with districts and schools is rooted in this model, which represents AVID's theory of action. I love that it has a triangle, and as we know, the triangle is the strongest shape, and so it holds its shape when pressure is applied because of the even distribution of the pressure that is put upon the sides. So with that, within this model, we see that we have student agency, which we know we need students to buy into whatever it is that we are teaching. We need them to have a stake in their education, and AVID seeks to do that for students. We also see that the rigorous academic preparedness, as well as the opportunity knowledge, hold up the sides that allow students to again, be involved in what it is that they're learning. And AVID provides the strategies for teachers to teach in such a way that that really allows students to latch on to their education. Educators take action together in alignment across 4 core domains. Right along the sides, which is probably hard to see there, but instruction, systems, leadership, and culture are the 4 domains that AVID is focused upon. We see here that what educators are expected to do has a direct relationship to what students need. And so AVID just, again, provides support for educators as well as students in giving them the strategies, which, as I thought about it in preparing for this, also aligns perfectly with our goal 3, which is talented and qualified professionals. AVID helps to provide support for educators to have more strategies, more things in their toolboxes to pull out of in order to connect with students and to teach students effectively. A part of the AVID framework is these wicker strategies. This is the foundation of the strategies that are taught. We all know writing and reading to learn is important. I love that AVID focuses on allowing students to express their thoughts and their ways of processing through writing, not just writing essays, but even in reflecting in their day-to-day lives. Inquiry-based learning is a large part of Wicker as well, where students are taught how to use COSTA's levels and think and process deeper in their way of thinking. Collaboration is one that we all know well, and we all know is a skill that students need in order to be successful in whatever avenue they choose to go. And then organization is another foundational piece, which I personally love, because it's not just organization of their tools, meaning their notebooks and their binders, whether it's online, their calendars, but it's organization in all areas of life. We all know or have heard the statement that if you fail to plan, you're inadvertently planning to fail. And so we want to make sure that our students are prepared in all areas, whether that's organizing their physical notebooks, their lives, their calendars, or if it's organizing themselves for their jobs and for the things that they need to accomplish, their schedules and all of that. Culture is another main part, which Goal 2 speaks about for our strategic plan. Culture is one of the core domains, and that just seeks for students to be future focused in college and career. We know that not all students will choose to pursue college after high school, but we want to make sure that the reasons that they choose not to is truly because it is their choice, whether they choose to go into the military or choose to go into other vocational trades. Culture that's built on our campuses should be barrier-breaking opportunities and exposures for students, global inclusion and interaction, and community growth and refinement. So as much as we focus on our academic side, we also try to make sure that, there is no try in this case, but we make sure that the culture that is felt on our campus is impacting for our students to allow them the opportunities to even think beyond what high school is.
AVID is a K-12 program. At the elementary school, it is a focus on school-wide strategies. The Wicker framework is incorporated at developmentally appropriate levels, K-5, and there's also vertical articulation between the strategies, K-12. So students exposed to that in kindergarten are using similar strategies developmentally more advanced in the 12th grade. At the elementary level, future-focused learning is celebrated and the prospect of college going is introduced.
So at this time, we would like to open it up for questions and comments from the board.
I think we missed a couple slides.
Yeah.
There, 612, the 612 slide.
Oh, I
That was earlier.
spoke, yeah, it was earlier, and so I was hoping to shift this slide up when I spoke about it. So covered it, you heard it.
Do any of the governing board members have questions or comments for our presenters at this time? Board Member Carney.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm excited about this, as I talked with Ms. Dansky about it last week. I just want to know, how did we decide on which schools we were going to try and launch this in?
I started advocating for AVID Arcadia High School because it's a good fit. And, you know, we have to recognize that the AVID program is very specific for students in the middle. And I think when we look at the demographics and the student population in Arcadia High School and also our school performance, is that there's room to grow. And the AVID framework is going to provide us with the training that we need for staff and the best teaching practices and supports that we need for students, whether those students are in special education or gifted. These strategies work for all groups of students.
Okay, thank you, because I know like Ingleside feeds into you, so is that another school that we'll be looking at
Want to speak?
for future?
Absolutely, yes. We are hoping that Ingleside next year, as they are just preparing and doing more research, and because we know that AVID works best when it's done with fidelity, and so we want all schools to be set up for success, and so they have opted to take some extra time to just prepare so that they
Okay,
can
awesome.
implement well.
Thank you.
Dr. Hartwells.
Thank you, Board President Sanowski. Thank you for your presentation, and Dr. Dansky, I know you bring quite a bit of experience to the district with AVID in the high school setting. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I worked in an AVID site of distinction for 8 years in Oregon, and my dissertation is in AVID.
Excellent. I have specifically about the academic outcomes, a question. You had referenced research shows that this kind of framework does lead to trajectory, increase in trajectory, which is outstanding. Do we here at SUSD, for our 4 schools that do have AVID, do we track that kind of correlations? And if so, what do we have a sense of that? Are we tracking with what the national research and what the pedagogical research indicates?
Typically, that data is collected at the high school level, and currently the schools that we have are elementary and middle school. So
Okay.
we're hoping that as we expand to potentially the high school, we'll really be able to track it more closely. At this point, at Tonalea 6 through 8, once they leave AVID at that point, the data stops tracking because AVID doesn't exist at the secondary high school level
Okay.
as yet.
One particular area that you can see an impact in, and one area that I studied, is in growth mindset, and also the organizational strategies for students. And one of my favorite interviews that I did with a 3rd grader, he said that I am not afraid to be popsicle sticked anymore because I know where to find the answer. And what they had focused on at the elementary was growth mindset, Cornell notes, in an organized binder. And that's all he needed to feel safe and comfortable in school. And that is the benefit of having AVID in K-5. And so we can measure it in those affective domains. And so I would say, yes, if we went and did some specific surveys and interviews, we would be able to see that.
Okay, those soft skills are transferable, certainly.
Very
Excellent.
much.
And then the other question is with respect to staffing. So you indicated there would be a AVID kind of mentor, I guess the same instructor, some consistency. Are we situated to be able to staff 4 new schools appropriately to execute with fidelity?
I can speak to staffing in Arcadia High School because it's something that I'm hoping to roll out for next school year. So if approved to roll out next school year, I would form an elective level at the 9th and 10th grades with approximately 25 students per section. That is a representative 0.4 FTE, so 1 section per. And we would pull that from RBF funding.
Okay.
In years 2 and 3, so this rolls up into 11th grade and then 12th grade. I'm estimating that we could potentially be FTE neutral because students have 6 choices for courses, and they would be using 1 elective opportunity. And so 25 students is 1 section. So it could be pulling from other electives that I would not have to run as many of. There are other costs associated, a stipend for a site coordinator. At the high school level, we have college tutors who come and work with students and run a tutorial experience. It's very powerful. And so there's, you need to pay them $15 an hour to come work for a few hours twice a week. In year 1, that cost would be approximately $3,400, $5,000 the second year, and then around $7,000 in year 3.
Okay, and we feel as a district, maybe Dr. Benson could speak to, I'm confident Dr. Dansky has thought through Arcadia High School and how to make this happen. What about our other 3 schools? We're in good shape?
Test, you're on?
Yeah.
Yes, it's an interesting program, if you will, that multiple funding sources would support. We always have to be thoughtful about supplanting, but district results-based dollars are intended to replicate programs that we know to be effective. And so we have situated and protected dollars to get this up and running from the district results-based dollars. But ESSER funding pays for AVID and recommends that too. DSEG dollars would also be able to pay for something like this too. So again, we're thoughtful about supplanting issues, and at this time have secured the dollars in district results-based.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those great questions. And Dr. Dansky and Ms. Johnson, thank you for this presentation. I think this is eye-opening to many people, and I really appreciate both your expertise on this subject because, again, it only benefits our students to be providing, especially I know those organizational challenges that students face when they're not given those soft skills, it continues to follow them. They don't just wake up someday with the skills in place. It's got to be consistent. So thank you for all that you do to help our students. Seeing that there are no more questions or comments, we will move on to the first read of Governing Board Policy BA regarding school board operational goals. Ms. McLennan.
Madam President, members of the Governing Board, Board Member Carney has asked for a first read of Governing Board Policy BA School Board Operational Goals. Dr. Menzel and I met with Ms. Carney, and she has suggested the following changes: that the paragraph that is listed in red and underlined be added to Governing Board Policy BA, and that the language that would then be duplicative at the bottom be stricken. And so I can ask Ms. Carney if she'd like to add anything, but this is available for your information and discussion as a first read.
Ms. Carney?
Thank you, Board President Sinowski. And Ms. McLennan, yes, the red line there, the second paragraph was our former language. This isn't new language. This is what our policy was before it was changed. And so I just asked that we inserted that paragraph back into the policy. Thank you.
Board Member Hart-Wells.
Thank you, President Sinowski. I have a few questions, and I don't know if Ms. McLennan, you're in the position to answer them, or perhaps Board Member Carney, since you proposed the language from 8 years ago to be revisited. And specifically, this was a concern expressed to me by a parent, and that is the use of the word own. So the question to me was, does the word own suggest that taxpayers without kids in the district have as many rights as parents who have enrolled students over their teaching and learning? So I'll just put that question to you because I have my own opinion of it, but that doesn't really matter. I'm not the one proposing the language. So maybe Ms. Carney, can you answer that question, please?
Well, to me, that means everyone that pays into our district and is a taxpayer or a parent, employee, anyone that is in our district. But what legally does that language mean?
Madam President, Dr. Hart-Wells, Ms. Carney, the school district is a political subdivision of the state of Arizona. So the owner, as a corporate entity, that's a political subdivision, which is also a public entity, considered to be basically a subordinate of our state government. So I'm not quite sure what that language modifies. If you look at the start of it, it says, as representatives of the people who own and support schools, the board accepts the responsibility. So ultimately, Ms. Carney's addition reflects what the board is supposed to do: accept responsibility to identify community attitudes and opinions and district needs.
But who owns the school as envisioned and contemplated by this language?
I can't answer that question. I can state that by definition, the school district's a political subdivision of the state of Arizona.
And I would just like to make a comment. You mentioned the word "we," Ms. Carney, and as individual board members, we all represent our own voices, and then collectively we vote. So just to clarify, the "we" was I. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm still uncertain as to what the verb own means, but I'm going to move on. That was a question that came in from a parent, so I'm just sharing that. This question is from me. The language then goes on to state, to identify community attitudes and opinions. And I have to ask, whose opinions?
Is that directed to Board Member Carney?
I'm guessing maybe Ms. McLennan can take a stab legally at what that's supposed to mean. Since this is direction of how the board is to operate, I'd like some clarity on whose opinions I'm supposed to be listening to if this language is adopted. And if Ms. McLennan wishes, Board Member Carney, I'd be happy to hear your understanding of it.
Madam President, Dr. Hartwells, the language that's proposed is ASBA's standard language within its copyrighted governing board policy BA. My, having a long affiliation with ASBA, my assumption would be that ASBA is about local control and that they're asking the governing board to look at its community and assert its local control over the attitudes and opinions. And I think that you all would look to the strategic plan you've developed to understand what your goals are in serving that community.
Okay, so Board Member Carney, is that what you understood the language to mean?
Yeah, I mean, and as I said in the last meeting when we had the discussion, this is the ASBA policy that most districts are using today. And so that's what I feel is best for us as well.
To be like everyone else. I would disagree with that. I'm unclear as to what opinions that we're supposed to be taking our direction from. And then there was a change in the verb from employ to require, that was not in the original language, to require short and long-term range strategies. Was that intentional? And if so, can I understand, that's a requirement as opposed to it's a tool in the toolbox to be used operationally when appropriate. So could I get clarity on the change there in that infinitive?
Madam President, Dr. Hartwells, I will go back and look, but I believe that I cut and pasted from your existing policy in 2014. It may have been a change that was made by ASBA and not picked up by Scottsdale Unified in the ensuing years, but I can double check that when it's presented for second read.
Okay, I just want to point out that language that is struck at the bottom of the policy uses the verb employ.
Okay, I understand. The language that Ms. Carney has asked to be added was in the 2014 policy. I don't know about the language that Ms. Carney is recommending be struck. I don't know why that chose to use the word employ rather than require. But that, I believe, would be an SUSD change that was made when the district revised the policy in February 2022.
To use the word employ instead of require?
Correct.
Very good. Okay, well, there was a reason that this language was struck from the policy last year when we've revisited this policy twice and now a third time in 12 months. So I remain still a bit, befuddled as to why we're revisiting this from 8 years ago. Thank you. I have no other questions.
Any other feedback from board members on this discussion item that they'd like to make at this time? All right, seeing none, we are going to move on to 7D, discussion of independent audit of special education in 504.
This agenda item was requested by Vice President Werner, and I thought it would be helpful if we had a brief conversation about what you were thinking and looking for. And we did ask Dr. Williams and Shannon Cron. Dr. Williams oversees special education. Shannon Cron oversees 504 to be present to answer any questions. A lot of work has been done in the past few years around special education, so we want to just get a little bit of clarity in terms of what was contemplated with respect to the request for an audit, so that when we go out for an RFP, we're setting the parameters properly. We do not have a presentation.
Board Member Werner.
Thank you. So SUSD is known for having a great special ed program. I think we have a great reputation for the delivery of the services that our students need. And having gone through the process myself with 2 of my children and hearing from our community of some of the needs that we have. And this is really an audit so that we can search out some best practices and really be able to provide the best for all of the students that need services, whether it's an IEP or whether it's a 504. And some of the concerns that come up are from parents who identify that their students have issues and need help. And the process for them to get services is incredibly difficult and often gets overlooked. And I can speak as a parent, I've experienced the same thing. So I'd like for us to take a look at and make the identifying process a little easier or simpler, so that when the concern is either coming from a teacher or from a parent that there's a concern with their student that they need some type of services or there's some issues going on, again, whether it's going for an IEP or a 504. And so that's the one concern. The other concern is the time, from the time that a student is identified as having a situation or needing services, to the time of testing, to the time of results, to the time of services actually being implemented. It's an incredibly long time. And we need to look at why is that? Is it staffing? Is it, what is it? So that we can improve upon it and make that process quicker so that our students can get the services they need quicker. And the third thing is that is of concern is when you meet for the testing and you're reviewing the tests with parents. So whether that's an annual, they're retesting, or it's an initial one. Parents get sat down with a 50-page test in front of them that they're expected to read through and understand, and then decisions are made based upon that. And typically what that room looks like, it's stacked with district personnel, some interns, maybe it's a speech pathologist, it's a psychologist, and then maybe some teachers or two. And then you have the parents. And it's a lonely spot to sit in as a parent, particularly because they're not experts in the subject. So I'd really like to take a look at giving parents 7 days to review the testing and the recommendations that is going to be recommended for their child by the district, and then give them an opportunity to seek out an advocate or any type of resources that they want to review to fully understand what they're going into so that their student can get the proper services that they need. So those are 3 things.
I'm going to ask that you two as professionals maybe provide a little bit of overview of the special ed task force that has met in the past and some of the recommendations that address Ms. Werner's concerns. And look at, because a lot of this I assume is regulated since it's a regulation of our federal government, at least the IEP portion of it. So maybe you can give an overview on some of the recommendations of the special ed task force right now in this discussion and conversation.
Sure. So specifically, one of the things looking at best practices, so the special ed task force looked at what practices and procedures we had within the district, and we looked at kind of some problem statements and some root causes of those, and I'm happy to share that information with the board. One of the areas to look at was our MTSS process, or our multi-tiered systems of support, and look at what processes and procedures we have in place in order to get kids the interventions that they need as quickly and as early as they need them. There is a strategic plan and a strategic task force that's also looking at the MTSS process and what that looks like as far as intervention supports for students prior to that evaluation process. As far as timelines and those things go, there are very specific timelines that we do have to fall under according to the ADE and state statute. So we are in compliance with all of those timelines. So those timelines include from the time that a parent requests an evaluation to the time that we have to hold a meeting with that parent. There's a specific timeline. There's a timeline from the time that we receive informed consent from a parent to the time that we have to complete testing that allows for a professional process and time for parents or for students to have that testing done in a time frame that meets their needs so that we're not, pulling them or rushing through the testing. And then there is a procedure for parents to have some time after that evaluation process is completed before any decisions have to be made. Decisions do not have to be made in that room. So there's a process in place for that, and then there's a timeline in order to create an IEP, should one be needed, after the evaluation process is finished. And that's actually, there's a timeline for that as well, to allow for parents to process through that information of the evaluation before a plan is written for the school.
Can I ask if this is communicated to the parents whose children are going through the evaluation process for the IEP?
Yes, typically it is done by the school psychologist. Sometimes there's more questions, sometimes there's less questions. It depends on whether it's an initial evaluation, if the student has been in early intervention, if it's a reevaluation. So it kind of depends, but the school psychologist is typically the one that leads that process. Oftentimes when they receive a request from a parent for an evaluation, the first thing they do is call the parent and talk through that process. Sometimes parents understand what the process looks like, sometimes they don't understand the process. They walk them through timelines, all of those things. They're also given procedural safeguards, which map out all of the parental rights that parents have. It's a long document, it's a packet. We offer it at every single meeting, and parents can take it. They don't have to take it every time. It's also available on our website and through the ADE as well.
Just to piggyback off of what you said, as a former school psychologist myself, I know one of the things that a lot of us would do would be to meet with the parent ahead of time to go over those evaluation results, answer questions, and explain. So when they are sitting in a room full of people, they were able to fully participate, and they had a better understanding of maybe what was being explained to them. So decisions were not made, prior to that team meeting, but it was nice for parents to be able to hear and absorb that information in a safe setting.
Ms. Crone, can you please identify, because you deal specifically with the 504 process, correct?
Correct.
Can you please go over the difference between an IEP and a 504 for those that are paying attention to this meeting today?
Sure, absolutely. So there's a lot of similarities between the IEP and the 504. The biggest difference between the two is with a 504, it's a student who has a medical or physical impairment or documented disability, which substantially, limits a major life activity. So we often see students who may have a food allergy where, they would need accommodations. We see students that have diabetes. So a lot of medical impairments, but then we also see students that have anxiety, ADHD. Those are two of the most common reasons as to why a student receive a 504. The biggest difference between the 504 and an IEP is 504 is special education, so students require specialized instruction, whereas a 504, those are students that really require more accommodations in the classroom, so they can receive specialized instruction, but if a student's needs significantly impact their learning, that's where we really start to look at that evaluation process and say, is this a student that's in need of more of those specialized instruction? So the biggest difference there is accommodations versus specialized instruction.
And the student may not necessarily need the 504 throughout their education in Scottsdale schools, correct?
They may not. So the 504s are reviewed every year, similar to the IEPs, and the team comes together to look at, to revise that 504. There are times where the student has learned, strategies and are able to apply those strategies in the classroom where accommodations are no longer, needed. But if they have that disability, oftentimes it is something that impacts them throughout the course of their school career, and so they would need those accommodations throughout.
Board Member Warner?
So there was one thing that I wanted to add to it as well, as looking at for best practices. I also understand that there's a lot of documenting and things that teachers have to do to stay in compliance. And, it's also something to look at. Is there a possibility of simplifying that? So it's taking a little bit of a load off from them, because there are definitely concerns in that area as well. And
Did you want her to respond to that?
Go ahead. Thank you.
Is there a possibility to reduce the expectation of, that's placed on teachers are you specifically referring to the 504 process?
I'm actually referring to both, because both We can go to the 504 and then I'll ask the same question. for
Okay.
IP. Yeah.
So that's a great question, and that's really kind of what our MTSS process is about, is helping teachers support all students in the classroom through that differentiated instruction and, providing those classroom supports and accommodations. A lot of what we see in 504s is really just good teaching that all students would benefit from. And so going back and thinking about, that tier 1 instruction, if we're implementing those supports and that differentiated instruction in the classroom, it really kind of decreases the need that students would need that written into a plan. Does that address your question?
Sort of, but I'll move on to Brooke and ask the same. We're really trying to lighten the load and reduce some of the expectations and the additional work, because I know there's documenting and there's things that they have to do in preparation for your meetings and so on, and that they are responsible for when they have students that are on 504s or have IEPs.
So I guess my question would be, what types of things are you looking to want to reduce? Teachers are one of the most important parts of and a required member of the IEP team, both the general education teacher as well as the special education teacher. So the data and the information that they bring to the team is so important. And having that information documented, while it does take some extra time and effort, allows the parent to be able to see that data in either written or documented form, so that we're not getting to a meeting and talking about anecdotal type things, that we're really talking about the documented successes and challenges that students are having in the classroom.
So I'm going to touch back on compliance, because I know that as a district, we do really well on compliance. So that's not what this is for. It really is to take a look at what are the best practices, what's really happening, particularly with the teachers. As an example, let's get some outside eyes on this and really get a good audit of it, and then be able to implement some new practices. So I've actually mentioned 4 things. It is if a parent comes forward thinking that there's something going on with their child and it needs extra services, whether it's through an IEP or a 504, and then the processes. And I understand that there are set timelines for that you have to do the by, right? But can we shorten those timelines to get that child support sooner than what's been happening in the past? And I loved what you said about a parent sitting with somebody ahead of time before they go into a meeting to make decisions. And that becomes probably burdensome again for some of these people, because now we're talking about more time. But something definitely would be really great if it would shift there. And so that's why I'm asking for this independent audit. And it really is to make us even better, and to get new best practices. And like I said, just make us better. And thank you for all you do.
Dr. Hartwells.
Thank you, Board President Sanowski. Thank you, Dr. Williams. Thank you, Ms. Cron, for being here. I had one, a request, and then 2, just a clarification in my understanding. In terms of the request, Dr. Williams, you referenced the Special Education Task Force that had some fits and starts because I think it straddled COVID, but it did wrap up. And in that task force, there was an analysis of best practices. And I believe we received that document in advance of the board meeting. And I remember Dr. Guerin had presented that information a little less than a year ago now, I believe, right? Okay.
She did. And we do have that information. We also have independent survey results, both a survey that went out to staff and I believe it went to parents and admin. That was a Likert type scale. So we have data from that, and then we did focus groups with classified staff, certified staff, and admin, looking at their concerns in the classrooms and or processes and procedures that we can look at. So we can look at some of that data as well.
Okay. So I'm trying to understand because I think the point of this was what's going to be in an RFP, right? So it needs to be able to be reduced to practice in a clear way and quantifiable way, because there's going to be a price tag associated with this. So what would that look like in an RFP, translating what Board Member Werner had just asked and what we already have
What's,
So based on the conversations we've had previously, I'm thinking there are a couple of things. One, we have a fair amount of data that exists already. We also have the ability to be clear about what the law requires. So under IDEA, what are the categories that qualify someone for special education services, so we can document all that. What we don't have are two things, I think. One, putting that all together into a compelling narrative of where we are, and then having the conversation, so to Board Member Werner's comment, best practices. So there are a number of ways that we can look at what are some of the best practices around the country. We work with Hanover Research. There might be something even in their research library to pull some of those ideas to say, okay, what do we know already in the literature about best practice? And then overlay that on what are we doing to identify opportunities for improvement. So there's the core standard of compliance, and then there's a standard of excellence that we aspire to if we're going to be world-class in what we do for all of our students, including our students with IEPs. So I think the benefit in an RFP might be to have someone who can take and compile all that together, because our people are spending their time working every day to meet the needs of our kids. And so there's this body of work to kind of tell the story and provide some directional cues for how we can be even better based on some of the evidence that we have, concerns that parents have expressed. So I think that's how I would envision the RFP being crafted, so that we can have something that helps us improve.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So then my next question is, I still have my clarification on policy, and I will get to it in a second. Is that an audit, or is that a consultant? That's a sincere question.
So I mean, personally, and I will let Board Member Werner talk about how she interprets audit. I interpret it as trying to really unpack where we are and how we can get better. That's what I understood from our conversation. And so if an audit is a postmortem on things that have been done, sometimes it's useful, but really what we're trying to do is kind of aspirationally figure out how do we become the very best we can be. So my understanding was that it's more of a consultative role, taking all of this information together, willing to look in the mirror honestly. So one of the things that I think people often get concerned about is they feel frustrated because something didn't work right, they don't understand why. So how do we make sure that we're looking in the mirror honestly with respect to where we are, celebrate the things that are working well, but also acknowledge where we can improve. So that's how I understood the audit to be, is taking that approach, not so much a forensic audit that's saying, well, what happened last year? I thought it was more about what are we doing now and how can we actually get better?
That's correct.
That was your hope
Yeah, that was-
with the
yes.
request? Okay, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. And then, and I can look this up, I guess, but maybe Board Member, or Ms. McLennan can just confirm that charge is within the scope of the charter for the audit committee.
Madam President, Dr. Hartwells, if I understand how the conversation is steering, what Ms. Werner has requested is that an outside individual look at the district's practices, particularly with respect to compliance regarding parent requests for evaluations, support for parents who are trying to interpret those evaluation results, and the speed in which the services are rendered. That, to me, is not an audit. That, to me, is consulting services, because an audit, for instance, and these ladies could speak to this, but ADE comes in and does a compliance audit, and what they're looking at is, did Scottsdale Unified comply with all of the IDEA regulations, 504 regulations? I don't think that's what Ms. Werner's concern is. So I do think that what you're talking about is looking at who can come in to provide that overlay of where the district should go next in trying to shorten those timeframes and be more than compliant.
And can I add to that? The operative word I heard was independent. So someone from outside the system, so that it's not just us telling our own story, but a third set of eyes to look at it. I think maybe that's where the word audit came in, when really what we're looking for is independent review.
And so to answer Dr. Hartwell's question directly, no, that would not fall within your policy. It would fall within the district's ability to employ a consultant, which would need to be properly procured.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. And I want to make sure what we just talked about here is you're comfortable with Board Member Warner, because this is a very important issue, so I want to make sure we get it right and then some. So make sure you're comfortable that it's hitting on all the goals that
Yes,
you
it
hope.
is. It is.
Okay, very
Board
good.
Member Carney.
And then I had, can I ask my policy clarification? This is quick. Policy IHB, this also goes to whether we really, maybe just a consultant would be better fit here. Under policy IHB, there is a section K at the outset of that policy that asks the administration to bring forward to the board no later than March 1st of each year a suggested reasonable ratio of student to teacher in special education and student to paraprofessional in special education. And I keep putting this on your radar screen, so I do it yet again this evening because we are talking about it. This is very important. It's also a ratio, Ms. Crozier, you can confirm, that's used when we set our budget. Yes, thank you. So I look forward, I know you're working on that because I know Dr. Williams has done a great job getting herself situated and getting special education compliance and an assessment, a holistic assessment. And I look forward to receive that by the deadline. Thank you.
Board Member Carney.
Thank you, President Sanowski. One thing I'd like to see if we could include is special ed transportation in this, because I know we're having a lot of issues. We're hearing from parents, that's an issue of concern. So I know that falls under transportation, but if that could be something included as well, I think that is really important. Thank you.
Are there any other comments, board members? I appreciate this discussion and professionals, thank you for your input. Appreciate it. And at this time, we will move on to action items. 8A, to begin with, the second read and approval of revisions to middle school planning guide for the 23-24 school year.
Dr. Dodds-Karen has just a couple of slides to remind people what the proposed changes were in the planning guide, and she'll be prepared to answer any questions.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. President Sanowski, Vice President Werner, governing board members, Dr. Menzel, Gladys, and Jennifer. Tonight, I'm just here to revisit what was presented a few weeks ago for the recommendations for the middle school planning guide for the 23-24 school year. We are recommending the expansion of dual language immersion Mandarin at Desert Canyon Middle School. We have a simple language update for civics and the civics test. On page 37, we have two new electives that we are proposing, CS 101 and CS 102 for coding, computer software development courses. We also have the same elective course on two different pages. It's a precursor to CTE of Design My Future. This course currently exists at Mountainside. There is an interest from our other schools to also have this elective. So we have tweaked it a little bit to not be isolated to IB with their language that is required at Mountainside, but opened up for all of our other schools. And then on page 56, we just updated some language on the gifted test criteria language, where we previously have been listing the title of the state exam that students are measured by. Given that the state exam name often changes, we've just simply changed that. With that, I'll take any questions.
Do any of the governing board members have questions? Yes, Board Member Carney.
Thank you, President Sanowski. I just had one question from, I had emailed Dr. Menzel about a couple corrections on the legal notice at the last page, and I just see that hasn't been updated, and I'm just wanting to know if that's.
Your version should be updated. We added the appropriate legal counsel. We fixed Dr. Sakos's last name. We gave her the O to make her Dr. Sakos. Again, so we did update that, so I'll just double check the version that you may have.
Okay, I just checked it before, and it wasn't attached to this, but I was just confirming that
Yes, that has been changed.
Okay.
And then, just so you all know as well, after you hopefully approve the recommendations we have for these courses or edits, then we go back through with a fine-tooth comb and we fix all of our grammar, all of our pages. Right now, it's in draft form, so we'll reformat it and create the index to match our page structure.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Seeing that there are no other Board Member Warner.
Thank you. So I don't have the presentation from last night in front of me, but I just wanted to make sure that the accessibility to honors programs and accelerated programs for our advanced students is accessible at all levels of middle schools. There's been some concerns that there are a couple of schools where they're not able to get honors classes.
That wasn't something that was part of our revisions, anything that would be a change. I can certainly work with Sarah Torrione and Gifted to see if there have been any staffing issues that may be impacting courses that are offered at a campus.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments, board members? Okay. Seeing none, since this is an action item, I'm going to call for a motion to approve the second read and revisions to the middle school planning guide for the 23-24 school year.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
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 So you
Any
made the
opposed?
motion.
Pardon me?
You made the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
No, none opposed, that motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Moving on to 8B, consideration of governing board policy BCC and waiver of additional readings pursuant to governing board policy BGB.
Madam President, members of the Governing Board, Governing Board Policy BCC was discussed at the last Governing Board meeting on January 17th. It is brought back to you for your consideration and to waive any additional readings required pursuant to Governing Board Policy BGB to allow you as a 5-member board to make whatever changes you would like to make to this policy.
All right. Governing board members, go ahead. Board Member Carney.
Thank you, President Sinowski. Yeah, so obviously one of our main responsibilities as board members is to develop and adopt policies. And so I think we need to be transparent around that. And that's why I want to have this discussion about this. On January 25th of 2022, language was removed from policy BBAA and turned into a separate policy, which is this, BCC, which was approved February 8th of 2022 meeting. The problem with it is that the board member who presented that change voiced to the public that there was no real change and that the language was just being moved over to a new policy. But that's untrue. And there was language added to policy BCC that was not originally in policy BBAA, and I think we need to talk about that. The second paragraph of policy BCC was never publicly mentioned in any of the 4 reads in 2022. And this paragraph in question, the second paragraph there, was left entirely off of the November 15th and December 6th reads altogether. So it's just concerning to me that there's just all of these things going on with it. So I'd just like to go through the language that was taken from policy BBAA and moved over to the second paragraph of policy BCC. Reads, if an individual board member directly requests information of a staff member, the board member shall copy the superintendent on such requests. But the new language added to BCC without anyone ever stating it or discussing it in public says, and the superintendent is permitted to intercede prior to the staff member responding to the board member. So I'm just wondering, why was this language added to the policy without anyone acknowledging it?
Madam President, members of the Governing Board, I was not your counsel in February 2022, so I don't know the answer to the question. You all had in-house counsel Lori Bird at that time.
Board Member Hartwells.
Well, I don't know the answer to the question because I'm not sure it's the right question. So we don't have each of these legacy documents in front of us to answer that question accurately at the moment. But I will say this, my understanding of this policy coming before us tonight was because at a previous board meeting, Board Member Carney had indicated that there was a copy in the board docs that did not have a unamended paragraph 2, paragraph 2 in it, and there was some confusion, even though that paragraph was not being amended at that time in December 6th, the adoption date that's at the bottom of the document. That was my understanding of what was coming before us tonight. Now we're hearing you have 12 months of having changed language. That's a very different type of assertion, and I would argue that we need to table this. I'm not comfortable voting on something where there's an allegation that there is multiple attempts to amend a policy without showing it to the public, which I don't believe happened at all. But I think putting out the timeline to be fully transparent and fair to everyone is appropriate, and therefore I would move that we table this policy.
So you're making a motion to table the policy?
I'm moving to table the policy so that we can bring it back and address the new content. That was not my understanding of why we were here tonight for this particular agenda item.
Thank you,
That's
Dr.
new content
Hartwells.
to me.
The motion has been made, and I would like to second that. All in favor of tabling this, say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Moving
Madam
on.
President, members of the governing board,
Yes.
I'd like to clarify. When it's brought back to you, do you want it brought back to you as a first read, or do you want it brought back to you as it was tonight so that you can act on it at the next board meeting?
Is there an opportunity for you to go back and clarify the work that had been done in the past based on recorded meetings?
Yes.
To actually present then accuracy of the information?
Right. I understand Ms. Carney's timeline to be accurate, but from what I recall.
Yeah.
But I can go back and confirm.
Sure.
And present. But my question to you is whether you want it to be on as a first read or as you can make a decision at the next board meeting.
I would suspect your motion was to bring it back as a first read according to the information.
Okay, I would prefer that, because I'd like to see the timeline with the supporting documentation of the strike-throughs.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Verify this, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, 8C, approve the award of request for proposal, RFP 23005, employee medical and pharmacy benefits. Shannon?
Yes, good evening, Board President Zanowski, Vice President Warner, members of the board, and guests here tonight. We are here to talk about an RFP that was done for medical insurance for our employees. Let's see if we get that loaded up. Okay. So to give a little bit of a background on this topic, currently the district is self-insured, meaning that we incur all and pay all costs for medical and pharmacy for our districts. It's typical of larger districts to be self-insured. It gives them more flexibility. There's not a set premium that you might experience if you were in a pooled program. There's pros and cons with it. If your district is doing well and you have healthy employees and it's a good year, you can have savings with that and see that benefit. If you have a year where things cost more, you have employees that have more health issues, then you end up paying more than you possibly anticipated for or budgeted for that year. We've had, in the past 5 years, we've had really good years, and the last 2 years haven't been as good, and so we paid a little bit more we paid a lot more for our medical insurance. So there's pros and cons with that type of insurance, but that is what we are in. We offer a PPO plan as well as 3 high deductible plans. With insurance, there are basically 2 types of insurance. We are in a trust currently. Within a trust, you can have pooled, which means they pool all of the different groups together, agencies, organizations, and the pooled trust decides what the premium is going to be. And they'll say, as a pool, this is what our collective costs are, and they'll set a premium based on that. Or you can be self-insured, which is what we are. Like again, I said, that again gives us the flexibility of how do we want to do those costs. It's also when we're looking at the cost of the district, it's just us. It's what cost have we incurred for medical. There's also direct purchase, which means you purchase directly from an insurance carrier. Currently, we use Kairos Health Insurance, which is a trust for that, and we are self-insured within that trust. So we have the flexibility with Kairos to determine what we want our premiums to be, as well as what those plans look like. One of the things when we were looking at this, so what's come up is medical insurance is really expensive. It's really expensive. And so part of what came about with this is because we are in a trust, we haven't done a bid for insurance in, gosh, I couldn't even tell you how many years, because we are not required to do an RFP or a bid if you are in a trust or part of a trust. And so we looked at it and said, and the governing board came back to us and said, there's a lot of expense with this, and we think it would be prudent to look to see, do we have the best option? Are we offering the best that we can for the best price that we can get for that insurance? And so that's kind of what sparked us moving forward with this process. As a part of that, we also wanted to look at how do we compare with our peer districts. So we took a look at Paradise Valley, Mesa, Gilbert, Dysart, Peoria, Chandler, and Deer Valley. Those are kind of the districts that we always get lumped up with when we're looking at how do we do on things. And what it really came down to, it's really hard to compare. Everybody has a different PPO plan. Some have higher deductibles, some have lower deductibles. With the high deductible plans, some have one high deductible plan and that's it. Some have two. We were the only one that has 3 high deductible plans. That makes a difference on what the cost is for that district. But the other variables that come into it is, do they have a higher cost claims index? Is their employee group younger in age, where maybe a little bit healthier, or is it older in age, where we start to unfortunately see things pop up a little bit more? Does it have issues with cancers or premature babies, things like that? Therapeutic medications are so expensive. And so you have to kind of look at, do they have those high claims? There's no way to tell when you're looking at dollars to dollars of what they spend and what we spend. We don't know what's necessarily included in their plan. In our current plan right now, we have Mayo Clinic. Not all plans have Mayo Clinic. That's an option that gets added on. And then the last part of it is how many employees are in that plan. That makes a big difference as well as to, again, older, younger, how many people are contributing to that. On a simple just dollar to dollar, we have a PPO, they have a PPO, how much do we pay, how much do they pay? We have a high deductible plan, how much do we pay, how much do they pay? It really came down to, in some cases, we are less expensive, in other cases, we're more expensive. So it was really looking at it, it was really hard to say, gosh, we're doing things really right, or boy, we were really doing things wrong and we need to figure something else out. One of the things we did notice that has come up is, are we paying an equal amount for every employee, or are there varying amounts? Scottsdale and Paradise Valley, in the information that we had, are the only 2 districts that are paying, contributing more, depending on what plan you're in. Part of that comes from, in the last couple of years, we have not passed the increase in medical costs onto our employees. The district itself has absorbed those costs. And as we've absorbed those costs, that's meant we've gone from a flat rate from every person, every premium, to varying rates that the district is contributing. We did find, I think it's Peoria, offered a plan where if you have 2 spouses that work for the district, then what they'll do is let you, like the one spouse doesn't claim the insurance, the other spouse claims family, and they apply basically what would have gone to both of the single employee towards that family. Something to consider. What we really found in looking at the comparison with other districts is we need to look more to see, do we have the right plans, and are there ways that we can lower our costs? And also knowing, I mean, some things you can do that just shift the cost, right? If you raise your deductible, it's cheaper for the district, but somebody's still paying an additional cost. But it's all things we need to look at and consider, and definitely things that are on our radar as we move forward, because there's definitely an increase, or definitely that's something we need to do within that plan. And I'm looking at this. This is not the updated one that was sent out on Saturday.
Can we get that?
Okay.
Thank you, Gladys.
We made a change to this this particular slide this weekend to break that down a little bit. What this one was looking at, so you want to know the difference in the two, is this one, annual premium, this is looking at just what was the district paying out of M&O. And what we wanted to show is that, yes, the district is paying out of M&O a certain amount for the contributions, but the self-insurance trust is also picking up a cost. And that, so broke it out with what the district is paying out of M&O and what the district is paying out through their self-insurance trust. Are we, is that getting updated or, okay. Do I need to escape out of here? I am so sorry about that change. As we're bringing that up, so one of the things I will say is that because we have had a healthy balance in our self-insurance trust, one of the decisions that's been made has been to utilize those funds within the self-insurance trust to help deal with those costs, to help pay out so that we weren't pushing, especially during a time when inflation was so high, that we weren't doing something that put more of a burden onto our employees, knowing that we had money within the self-insurance trust that could help offset that. Thank you. This is the good slide. So as you can see, the first column, we've been out of the M&O, we've basically been contributing the same amount. It's lesser on those lower plans because they were lower at the time. We made a decision that whatever increases were coming were going to be covered by the district self-insurance trust. So as you can see, it really varies as to what we're paying. In some cases, between the district and the self-insurance trust, we're covering as much as $9,000 towards a family plan if you're on the PPO. In addition to, M&O contributes to the HSA plans. If you pick one of the high deductible plans, they'll contribute money to your HSA plan. So this just really looks at what are we paying. Like I said, in comparison to our other districts, in some cases we're higher, in some cases we are lower. So what was the process that we went through as we did this? We looked at it and knew that this is a big deal. This is not a simple, small RFP process that you put together a scope quickly and then put that out to bid and collect that information and review it in a couple of days. This is a big scope and it's a big ask. And so we wanted to make sure that we did it appropriately and we got people to help us out. I can talk to you about numbers all day. I am not a guru of insurance and how pharmaceutical works and the ins and out of the medical and pharmacy world. So we said we need some help as we develop that scope. So in November of 21, the governing board approved us using Siegel, which is a human resource benefits company that helps do that. This is exactly what they do. They put together bids for our RFPs for medical insurance. So we signed on with them. We met with them in February, talked about timelines, talked about what are the needs of the district, what are the types of insurance. Are we looking for a specific type, like a trust? Are we looking for a direct carrier? What were we looking for? So we met with them on that. In May, we did a thought exchange with our employees to find out what were they looking for when it came to our insurance. And I'll touch on what those responses came in just a minute here. We met with Mesa Public Schools. They direct purchase from an insurance carrier. That's different than what we've done in our district, and so we thought we want to meet with another district to understand how does that work? What are the pros and cons? Are there things we need to consider when we're looking at that? And so we met with them to get feedback on how that works, and so we could have a clear understanding of what that looks like as we go into this process as well. Then we collected data from our current provider. That takes a long time. There's a lot of data on how what our medical spend has been, but they received that. And then in September, there was a draft RFP for us to review. We put that out in October, was downloaded by 35 vendors. We had 9 that actually responded to that in the time that it was due within. And then Siegel's job for us was to take all of that information and to compile it into a way that would be easy to review. It's really hard when you're looking at a notebook and, or in this case, a digital book, and say, okay, well, they answered this on, question number 2, they said this, what does everybody else say? So what Siegel did is took that information and said, here's the list of questions we asked, here's the responses from each vendor. So we could do a side-by-side comparison. So it took them a little bit of time to go through all of that as well, compile it for us, and then bring that to us to be able to review. We wanted to make sure that in this process, we heard from a variety of people. Typically, our process involves 3 to 5 individuals looking at it, but we felt like we need lots of eyes to be able to look at this and have a collective review from all kinds of employee groups. So we did a 2-step process for the review. The first step was made up of a principal, a teacher, and a classified employee. To be able to collect those employees, we reached out to the presidents of our 3 employee groups and said, do you have any recommendations of somebody from your groups that would like to participate in that? In one of the cases, we used the principal who'd been on our insurance committee in the past. They reviewed the selections, made a selection for their top 3 choices, and then passed that on to a second review committee, which was myself, the director of finance, the director of payroll and benefits, the assistant superintendent of human resources. When we look at the scope of work of what we asked, there was 6 major components. First, we asked for third-party administration. So we needed somebody who could look at the claims, administration, the case management, PPO network access and wellness programming. We asked for pharmacy benefits management, health savings account administration, flexible spending account administration, employee assistance, as well as COBRA. We did not want to limit ourselves to a specific type of insurance, so we opened it up and said, show us what it looks like between a trust and a direct purchase program, so we had it open to be able to compare both of those options. And the other thing we said is, these are the plans we have right now. We're not locked into them. We're open to suggestions, so you can base that off of what our plans are currently right now. We're open to suggestion as to what other options could be there for cost savings as well. When we did the thought exchange, we had 233 participants, 207 thoughts, and 3,827 ratings. We asked one question: what do you feel are the most important things that SUSD should consider as we plan for future health insurance coverage and benefits? We had a lot of the same comments, different words maybe, but the same thing. Affordable cost of medical premiums and pharmacy, good coverage, mental health and wellness, and consistent with the same providers. I will tell you, a couple of years ago when we moved to Kairos, we had to change the health savings administrator. So we went from a different account company for your HSA. And I learned at that time that's a quick way to make a lot of people really upset, is to mess with that HSA card. And then while on Kairos, we moved from from Blue Cross Blue Shield to United. And I also learned, don't mess with people's doctors. That's another quick way to upset folks. So that was one of the things we thought, okay, we need to make sure they know that those are quick ways to upset our employees. And I get it, those are important things. As part of the scope, like I said, Siegel gave us detailed comparison lists to look at the response and companies' responses to line those up to review easily. They also gave us a summary of the proposals. We also had access to the proposals ourselves to go through and review them. This is just the points criteria we used. It's very similar. It's how we use all of our points criteria when we're doing RFPs, but that was the criteria we used. Like I said, we had a 2-tier committee. The first one, again, being a principal, teacher, classified, and our benefit specialist, and then the second tier. And so the unanimous recommendation from both tiers, and the one that scored the highest out of all scoring, was Kairos Health Insurance. So that is the company we are bringing forth for recommendation tonight. Through this process, we had made it about 3 RFPs. If we made one RFP that encompassed medical, dental, vision, and all of the ancillary insurance we had, it would be a beast of an RFP. Medical is already a beast of an RFP. So we kind of chunked that. We put that on hold. We can take that off of hold. We can continue to move forward. We kind of have left it at the governing board's discretion as to, 1, moving forward with the recommendation, and 2, do you want us to move forward with that, or we can talk about what that looks like at a different time. But right now we put that on hold just to decide, or just for the governing board to decide what steps they'd like us to take next. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Shannon, when do you suspect that the that we would be able to work on the dental, vision, and ancillary insurance RFP?
The dental, vision, and ancillary RFP is already done, and we have received responses for that. So we would, if the recommendation is to move forward reviewing those separately, we would move forward with that, probably have a recommendation, I'm going to say March at this point, hopefully early March, I would think. Maybe. I'm looking at our procurement director. The ancillary, unfortunately, our timelines were a little bit off, so the ancillary, we now have a scope to review. It would still need to go out, get the bids, and then review. We can do that. We have a little bit of time. The only concern that we would get into is we typically put together a benefits package for open enrollment in mid-spring. So we're getting a little bit tight to be able to have that done. It's still possible.
Okay, that was my concern, was the timeline
Yeah.
with contracts and stuff coming out.
So contracts could go out. We just don't do open enrollment until April-ish, mid-April-ish timeframe.
But I also understand that sometimes the package is a consideration for retaining employees. So I do appreciate the work. Any other comments from guests? Board Member Lindsay.
Was there analysis done that these are the 4 very best plans for our district?
So that's a great question. That was not part of the scope, but I think that is something we absolutely need to do. We absolutely need to communicate better what our insurance is and how, as employees, we can make it more affordable for ourselves, but for the district. I don't know that employees always know, and I'm not advocating for don't get the best healthcare you could possibly get, but I'm not sure if people always understand the district pays for that bill. So when you make the choices that you make, and I'm, again, not advocating don't go to the doctors, but the choices we make with our healthcare, the district covers that. And at the end of the day, that's also out of, as an employee, your pocket. So I think we need to do better about promoting wellness, about our insurance programs, but absolutely we need to look at, do we have the best programs? Is our PPO the best we can do? Is it the most affordable we could do? Should we have 3 high deductible plans when everybody else has 1 or 2? That's absolutely something we should look at. One of the other things we've talked about is we don't use clinical advocacy as much as other people do. We've been skittish about saying, yes, here's our employees' phone numbers to reach out to them. But I think that's something that during open enrollment, we need to make as an option for our employees to understand that if you would like this benefit, it could be a huge benefit for you and for the district, and you can select that. That way we're not just handing out phone numbers, but we are letting our employees make the choice if they'd like to have that service available to them, because that is a service that has helped other districts out with their costs. So absolutely think we need to look at a lot of things. Right now we offer a plan that is kind of like Weight Watchers type. It's not Weight Watchers, but it's a weight management plan. Are people utilizing it? Not as much as we thought they would, so maybe that's a small cost, but those are the things we need to look at is what are we doing? What are some of the ways we can get the cost down? Because it is expensive, and it's expensive for our families.
Board Member Hartwells.
Thank you, Board President Sinowski. And one question, does this recommendation with Kairos check all those boxes that our employees identified as needs, those 4 that you showed on the slide?
The thought exchange ones? I mean, it's hard to define affordable healthcare because healthcare isn't affordable. We did look at cost, and that was one of the factors we looked at. That is something we have to continue to look at and see what we can do to make it a little bit more affordable. I think that's the biggest issue for us. Is it good coverage? It's United Healthcare. It's the same coverage we have right now. Does it have mental and health wellness? Yes, it does. It offers an EAP program, as well as programs designed for making sure that folks are getting their annual checkups and checking your cholesterol and your A1C and making sure that, you're doing the annual things that you need to do for good health. Consistent with the same providers. It's the company we're
It's the same.
with. And not that was, I don't want it to seem like we just went with what we already have. That was not at all what we were looking at going forward with this. We really did look at what what could we do about cost and making sure that we offer the best that we could for our employees.
Okay, thank you. And then on the dental and vision, you said you've already received the responses to the RFP? for
Yes,
those
I have not
particular-
seen them. We've had them on kind of a hold
Okay.
to determine if the governing board wanted us to continue to move forward with that process or just continue with what we have.
And if that timeline, do we have enough time, given contracts will be rolling out here soon? What do we, in terms of a timeline, what do you suggest? If we hold off now, that could be too compressed of a timeline, or give us some guidance?
If you're wanting this to all be wrapped up by the time we issue contracts to our teachers, no, we do not have time. If you're asking, do we have time to do this before we have to make our annual selections and open enrollment? Tight, but yes.
If we proceed now?
If we,
With the
if we,
dental vision.
yeah, if we went back tomorrow and said, yeah, if you said move forward with those, and we went back to Siegel tomorrow and our team and said, yep, evaluate the ones that we have now, and move quickly forward with the ancillary, tight, but I think doable.
But it would need to start.
But I would not have that in time for contracts.
Okay. So even if we start with if we give you the green light on the dental vision and ancillary, there's still not a possibility to even get the dental vision? Maybe I'm not asking this question properly.
So I think I understand the question. We already have the dental and vision RFPs in hand. We just haven't analyzed those.
Yeah.
So that's just a timing process to determine, are the bids that we've received, do they provide a better benefit at a lower cost than what we currently have? We have the ability to do that analysis and get it in place for the open enrollment period, but not in time to be able to specifically say what that would be in the contracts, because the contracts are going to go out at the beginning of March. The ancillary is a different conversation, because that one is behind the 8 ball. And so it may be in our best interest to roll the ancillary benefit that we currently have forward, so that we have that as a known, review the dental and vision that we have bids for, because it could very well be that our current plan is the one that we should stay with. We need to review the bids to know, are we getting the best value for the dollar? No reason to delay that analysis. It just means that we won't have that clarity on where we've landed at the time contracts go out, but we'll have clarity that there'll be dental and vision benefits for our employees. So that's not what's going to be lost, it's just the specifics. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I'm really thinking with a hat on of being an employee, would I want that certainty before I entered into a contract, where you might get that certainty at another district? So
I'm going to so Roger Spivey is our director of purchasing, and I think can explain some of that better than I'm doing.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that we really have to look at, and we put this on hold, the evaluation of the dental and vision, purposely, because if we continue with Kairos, now we're also still continuing with that employee benefits trust, right? So we can move forward with dental and vision through Kairos and not need the RFP process, because as long as we're participating in that trust, it's exempt. So it doesn't require additional procurement. So it's, do you want us to do an additional procurement when we could lean on Kairos and they could do that evaluation for us, and we could purchase through the trust instead of doing it on our own? Because if we decided to do dental and vision separately from Kairos, then we also need to find someone to administer that plan, because currently we don't have the capabilities to do that internally. We would have to find a third-party administrator if we decided to break away and do those benefits separately.
Thank you, that's helpful. I thought the whole point of this exercise, though, was to evaluate costs.
So we did that with health insurance first, because that's the lion's share.
Dan.
And then we ended up with Kairos. So we can do the same with dental and vision. I think what Roger's pointing out is that it may end up in the very same place, where we find that there's really not a material difference between what we get a la carte with separate providers and what we would be able to get under Kairos. But if we go with a separate RFP and a separate provider, then we have to have a third-party administrator for that in addition to Kairos. So if the board's going to approve Kairos, then we could move forward with certainty about all of these other things under that umbrella, because we've already put out to bid the largest component of our health insurance cost.
Correct.
So in other words, we're right back where we started?
I would say no, because we didn't have certainty. When we went with Kairos initially, we didn't put anything out for bid. So we didn't test the market at all. We've tested the market now on the biggest cost of, insurance benefit and found that Kairos for us right now still represents the best value for the dollar.
Assuming we stay with the plans as proposed.
Board Member Lindsay.
Kairos has different dental and vision plans besides the ones we use, right?
No, the plan that we use is the one that's contracted through them. So
But do they have other, like other districts, do they go through Kairos and have
Yes.
different dental and
They,
vision?
they go through Kairos. Their plan may not match exactly as ours does, but the vendor is the same.
So we might be able to find a better deal in Kairos for a little bit different dental and vision.
Yes, they might have, there might be something besides the vendors that Kairos is using
Well,
for
they're-
dental and vision.
Currently, they're using them, but we're not, like, we're using different dental.
No, we're using
Like
dental and.
Higley, for example, is in Kairos, they may have different dental and vision through Kairos.
They may have different coverage, but they're using the
The
same
same
provider.
provider,
Okay.
yeah.
Correct.
So we might be able to get something different that's better, cost-wise.
Through Kairos or through looking
Through
through the
Kairos.
bids? Through Kairos, we could maybe, same type of thing, looking at the premiums or the,
Plan structure.
the plan structure. We might be able to do something different within the plan structure to make it better. The providers would still be the same providers with Kairos.
Okay, so it's like the health insurance, because
Yeah.
I'm on a different type plan through Kairos than what we have. Okay.
Yeah.
Can I make a request? When this comes out to employees with these options, can we make sure that, with certainty, that there's an explanation, a very clear explanation of what the out-of-pocket expenses are going to be if there's a change to the employee? Because I think that's always the bottom line for employees, like, well, what is this going to cost me? Okay,
So when we do our our open enrollment, there's a package that goes out that shows what all of the different options are. We also offer to do fairs and have our benefits folks come out and speak with, well, it'll be, hey, we're at this community this day, where they'll talk to them about what are the questions, what does this mean? What is the difference between a PPO and a high deductible plan? Which high deductible plan is better for me? But that is when we put that packet out, that information is within what are the different deductibles. If I have employee or if it's employee with family, how much is it gonna cost out of pocket?
yes,
And how much is it gonna cost if I go with this plan? I'm gonna have a deductible of $1,500 or depending on which plan you go with.
right. So to provide a summary, a simple summary, so they don't have to go somewhere to learn more about the options we're providing for them. I think the health fair is nice, but not everyone has the opportunity to take advantage of that.
Absolutely, and we have that with, like I said, when you go through your different options, it states in there what are the different options. It shows how much your monthly premium will be, as well as what are the definitions of the plans and what do those deductibles look like.
Okay, good. Any other questions on this topic? All right, seeing that there are none, I would like to make a motion to approve the award request proposal RFP 23005, employee medical and pharmacy benefits. Is there a second?
I have a
Yes.
clarification question.
Sure.
So this motion is specific to medical and pharmacy
Correct.
only?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 That motion passes 5-0. Thank you. And I believe, Shannon, you're going to be
Now-
up here with us for the next two. Yes,
And then
Go ahead.
as a follow-up, there was a request, although it's not as
Vision,
an action.
dental,
about the-
ancillary.
Yeah, dental and vision and guidance therefore, so. how
So
should
I'm
we
gonna
deal
ask
with that?
Jennifer for guidance on how to seek the clarification on, do we move forward or do we not move forward?
Madam President, members of the governing board, Ms. Crozier, I would assume that you all will make your best recommendation and bring this back to the governing board. So I don't think you need further direction from the board to do that because you've heard their thoughts and they are cost and employees. So
Yes.
that's what I would do.
Okay,
okay, super.
And don't leave, Shannon.
I won't.
I told her not to leave because
leave.
she's
You
going
got
to be able
two
to
more.
answer the next two questions.
Right,
Agenda items,
We're
yes.
moving on to 8D, Shannon. Approve the use of the State of Arizona cooperative contract for the purchase of asbestos abatement services.
We don't have presentations, we just have information to be able to answer any questions you might have about these. Maybe a little overview in terms of what it's going to do for us.
Yes, Board President Sanowski, Vice President Warner, members of the board. As we are working through the Pueblo rebuild, part of that process, when you get into older schools, is asbestos abatement, which we need to do as we demolish and work through that rebuild at Pueblo. As such, we have gone out to state contract, and they actually went to state contract. There's a variety of vendors on state contract. So the process was to look at 3 different vendors, look at the cost and what they would offer, and have them look at the scope. And from that, they made a selection, which is the recommendation for the governing board tonight.
Thank you, Shannon. Governing board members, do you have any questions for Shannon on this particular issue? Seeing none, I call for a motion to approve the use of the State of Arizona cooperative contract for the purchase of asbestos abatement services.
Second?
I'm calling for that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, seconded by Carney. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes 5-0. And Shannon, on to 8E, approve the use of the State of Arizona cooperative contract for the purchase of elevator repair, maintenance, and service.
Yes, Board President Sanowski, Vice President Warner, members of the board. Redfield Elementary has as a 2-story, has an elevator, which is reached a point that receiving some of those parts are more difficult. It's kind of got to its end of cycle with that elevator. And so to be in compliance with ADA, we are looking to do some more substantial repairs there. And so again, this was brought through state contract, reviewed the different vendors that are out there, looked for what is the best cost for the scope of work that we're asking for. And so the recommendation brought forth is based off of that need.
Governing board members, do any of you have questions on modernizing the elevator at Redfield for Shannon? Seeing that there are none, I would like to make a motion to approve 8E, the use of the state cooperative contract and for the purchase of elevator repair, maintenance, and services. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Hartwells. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 5-0. Thank you. And at this time, I would like to make a motion to adjourn this special governing board meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 5-0. It's 7:52 PM.